Most people think one reckless moment can ruin a life. They never consider that it might save one instead. I was not supposed to be at that charity gala. That was the truth. My advisors wanted me there. My partners expected me there. The newspapers loved photographing me at events like that. So I showed up wearing a tailored black suit, carrying the same expression I wore to every public appearance. Calm, controlled, untouchable. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Manhattan shimmered beyond the enormous windows. Politicians, celebrities, executives, and socialites filled the room with practiced smiles and expensive conversations. I had spent years mastering those rooms. They all looked the same after a while. Different faces, same ambitions, same performances. Then I saw her, Emily Foster. At that moment, she was nobody special to me. Just a young woman working for the event company. She moved between tables carrying schedules and helping guests find their seats. Unlike everyone else in the room, she did not seem interested in status. She looked focused, genuine, real. I noticed her once and forgot about her immediately. At least I thought I did. About an hour later, I was standing near the center of the ballroom speaking with several investors when something changed. It started with a look. Emily suddenly appeared across the room. Her eyes widened. Not with admiration, not with recognition, with concern. She was staring directly at me. Then she started moving through the crowd. Fast, very fast. At first, I assumed something had happened with the event. Maybe a scheduling issue. Maybe a guest problem. She reached me seconds later. The investors stopped talking. Emily looked nervous. Her breathing was uneven. Her cheeks were slightly flushed. "Sir," she said. Then she glanced around. Whatever she wanted to say seemed trapped inside her throat. I waited. So did everyone else. The room suddenly felt smaller. Emily looked over my shoulder. For a brief second, panic flashed across her face. Then she did something completely unexpected. Before I could react, she stepped closer and kissed my cheek. The entire conversation stopped. Every investor standing around me froze. Emily wrapped an arm lightly around mine and smiled as if we already knew each other. The performance was convincing. Too convincing. She leaned closer and whispered quietly, "Please do not react. Your ex-girlfriend just walked into the room with reporters. She has been telling everyone she is getting back together with you tonight." I stared at her. For 2 seconds, I forgot how to speak. Then I saw exactly what she meant. Across the ballroom, cameras were already turning in our direction. A woman I had not seen in nearly 2 years was making her way through the crowd. Emily's quick thinking had just prevented a public disaster. The investors immediately assumed Emily was someone important in my life. The reporters changed direction. The situation dissolved before it could become tomorrow's headline. Smart, fast, effective. Emily slowly stepped back. Relief appeared on her face. "Sorry," she whispered. It was the only thing I could think of. Around us, the gala resumed its rhythm. Conversations restarted. Music continued. Everything returned to normal. Everything except me. Because for the first time all evening, I was no longer paying attention to the room. I was watching her walk away. And somehow, without realizing it, one reckless second had just changed the course of both our lives. Most people spent their lives trying to impress me. Emily Foster spent less than 10 seconds saving me and then immediately tried to disappear. That alone made her impossible to ignore. After she walked away, I remained standing in the ballroom pretending to listen to conversations I could no longer hear. The investors kept talking. The music continued. Reporters moved toward another story. Yet my attention followed a young woman weaving through the crowd with a clipboard tucked beneath her arm. She acted as though nothing extraordinary had happened. As though she had not just prevented a public spectacle from becoming tomorrow's front-page headline. I watched her for the rest of the evening. Not in an obvious way. Men like me learned long ago how to observe without being noticed. Emily greeted guests, solved problems, directed staff, and handled unexpected situations with calm efficiency. Every time a complication appeared, she somehow fixed it before anyone else even recognized it existed. Around midnight, the gala finally began winding down. Guests started leaving. The ballroom slowly emptied beneath the fading glow of crystal chandeliers. I should have left with my security team. Instead, I found myself searching for Emily. I spotted her near the loading entrance helping workers organize equipment. She looked exhausted. A loose strand of hair had escaped her neat hairstyle. Her heels were probably killing her feet after 10 hours of standing. Yet she was still smiling while helping everyone around her. I walked toward her before I had time to question the decision. Emily Foster. She turned immediately. Surprise flashed across her face. Mr. Moretti. Up close, she looked even younger than I first thought. Not naive, just genuine. A rare quality in my world. Thank you, I said. She blinked. For what? The question almost made me laugh. For saving me from a very unpleasant evening. Color appeared in her cheeks. I was only trying to help. Only trying to help. Most people wanted something from me. Money. Influence. Connections. Emily had acted without expecting anything in return. Still, I said, you handled it well. She smiled awkwardly. Honestly, I was terrified. That answer felt refreshingly honest. For a second, neither of us spoke. The city lights glittered through nearby windows. Trucks unloaded equipment outside. The night air drifted through an open service door. Then Emily looked at her watch. I should probably get back to work. I nodded. She started walking away, then stopped. Your ex-girlfriend looked very angry, by the way. I laughed for the first time all evening. A real laugh. Not the polite version reserved for business meetings. Emily smiled when she heard it. Then she disappeared into the crowd of workers. I watched her go. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not attraction. Not yet. Curiosity. The next morning, I should have forgotten about her. Instead, while reviewing reports in my Manhattan office, I found myself remembering the sound of her voice. The confidence hidden beneath her nervousness. The way she had stepped into a difficult situation without hesitation. By lunchtime, I did something I almost never did. I asked one of my men to find out who Emily Foster was. And when the file arrived on my desk later that afternoon, I opened it immediately. That was my first mistake. Because the moment I started learning about her, I stopped being able to forget her. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It starts small. A question, a glance, a single name that refuses to leave your mind. Then one day you realize you are rearranging your schedule just to see someone for 5 minutes. The file on Emily Foster sat on my desk for less than an hour before I memorized every page. 26 years old. Raised in Brooklyn. Event coordinator. No scandals. No hidden agenda. No connection to my world. The information should have satisfied my curiosity. Instead, it made everything worse. Because now she felt real. The following week, I attended a fundraising luncheon at a luxury hotel downtown. Normally, I would have arrived, delivered a speech, shaken hands, and left within 45 minutes. That was the plan. Then I walked into the ballroom and saw Emily directing staff near the stage. I stopped, just for a second. She was holding a clipboard, speaking into a headset, and somehow coordinating 200 guests without showing the slightest sign of stress. Everyone around her seemed calmer because she was there. I found myself watching her longer than necessary. When she finally noticed me, surprise crossed her face. Mr. Moretti. Emily. Her smile appeared instantly. Genuine. Warm. Not the kind of smile people usually gave me. Most smiled because they wanted something. Emily smiled because she was happy to see another human being. The difference was impossible to ignore. No emergency tonight? I asked. She laughed softly. Not yet. The sound lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. Over the next month, something strange happened. Emily kept appearing. Not because I arranged it. At least not entirely. Charity dinners. Corporate events. Community fundraisers. Every time I attended another public function, there she was. Organizing. Solving problems. Helping people. One rainy Thursday evening, I arrived early to a nonprofit fundraiser on the Upper East Side. The weather had turned miserable. Wind pushed rain against the windows. Guests hurried inside, carrying umbrellas. As I stepped through the entrance, I noticed Emily kneeling beside an elderly woman whose cane had broken. Most people walked past without noticing. Emily stayed. She called maintenance, found a chair, brought water, stayed with the woman until help arrived. Nobody asked her to do it. Nobody was watching. She simply cared. I remained near the entrance longer than necessary. Watching, learning, understanding. That night, after the event ended, I offered her a ride home. She hesitated for several seconds before accepting. The city lights reflected across rain-soaked streets as the car moved through Manhattan. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Emily glanced out the window and smiled. You know, most people are terrified of you. I looked at her. And you are not. She laughed. Should I be? The answer caught me completely off guard. Nobody had ever asked me that before. By the time the car stopped outside her apartment building, I realized something unsettling. Emily did not see the reputation. She did not see the power. She saw me. And when she stepped out into the rain and waved goodbye before disappearing through the front door, I sat there longer than I should have. Because for the first time in years, I was already looking forward to seeing someone again. The city started noticing before we did. Or maybe before Emily did. I had noticed long ago. Manhattan has a strange way of turning attention into rumors. A photograph here. A conversation there. A familiar face appearing beside another often enough that people begin creating stories of their own. By the middle of spring, my name and Emily's name had started appearing in the same sentences. Not in newspapers. Not yet. But among event organizers, business circles, and people who spent their lives observing other people. The strange part was that Emily seemed completely unaware of it. One evening, I arrived at a charity auction held inside a historic building overlooking the Hudson River. The ballroom glowed beneath warm golden lights. Live music drifted through the air. Guests moved between displays of artwork and fundraising exhibits. I spotted Emily almost immediately. She was standing near a registration table helping a nervous volunteer who looked moments away from a complete breakdown. 10 minutes later, the volunteer was smiling again. Emily had that effect on people. She made difficult things seem manageable. As I crossed the room toward her, several conversations suddenly stopped. A few guests exchanged knowing looks. One woman smiled directly at me before glancing toward Emily. I recognized the expression instantly. People were talking. Emily did not. She greeted me the same way she always did. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti." I smiled. "We have known each other for months. You can call me Luca." She laughed softly. "I am still getting used to that." The sound settled somewhere deeper inside me than it should have. Throughout the evening, I found myself repeatedly drawn toward wherever she happened to be. Not intentionally. At least that was the excuse I gave myself. Yet every conversation seemed shorter when she was not nearby. Every room felt less interesting when she left it. At one point, I found her standing alone near a balcony overlooking the river. The skyline shimmered beneath the evening sky. Boats drifted across dark water illuminated by city lights. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there watching New York glow beneath the night. "Do you ever get tired of all this?" Emily asked quietly. "All what?" She gestured toward the ballroom behind us. "The attention. The expectations. Everyone watching every move you make." I considered the question. "Sometimes." Emily nodded as if she understood more than I expected. Then her expression softened. "That sounds lonely." The answer should have been simple. Instead, I found myself looking directly at her. It was. Emily met my eyes. Something shifted between us. Small. Invisible. Yet impossible to ignore. Then the moment broke when another guest approached. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and handshakes. But as I prepared to leave, one of my business associates stepped beside me and glanced across the room toward Emily. "You know everyone thinks she is special to you, right?" he said casually. I followed his gaze. Emily was laughing with several volunteers near the exit. For the first time, I did not deny it. I simply watched her. And somewhere deep inside, a realization quietly settled into place. The city might have been talking about us. The difference was that I was starting to hope they were right. People often assume power makes a man fearless. The truth is that power only changes what he fears losing. A week after the charity auction, I began noticing something I had carefully avoided admitting to myself. Emily had become part of my routine. Not because she worked for me. Not because I expected to see her. Simply because my days felt different when she was around. One Saturday morning, I received an invitation to a small community fundraising event in Brooklyn. Normally, I would have sent a representative. My schedule was full. My time was valuable. Yet the moment I saw Emily's name listed among the organizers, I found myself clearing the afternoon. The event took place in a neighborhood recreation center surrounded by brick buildings and tree-lined streets. It was nothing like the grand galas and luxury venues where I usually spent my evenings. There were folding tables, handmade decorations, local musicians, and families enjoying a sunny spring afternoon. For the first time in a long while, nobody seemed interested in who I was. They were there for each other. When I arrived, I immediately spotted Emily near a booth collecting donations for after-school programs. She looked different outside the formal world of corporate events. More relaxed. More natural. She wore simple clothes, her hair pulled back loosely, sunlight reflecting in her blue eyes. Children ran toward her every few minutes. Elderly neighbors greeted her by name. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to see her, and she knew every single person. I spent most of the afternoon observing something I had never witnessed before. Emily was not helping because it was her job. She was helping because it was who she was. At one point, a little girl accidentally dropped an entire tray of baked goods onto the sidewalk. The child looked devastated. Before anyone else could react, Emily knelt beside her, helped pick everything up, and somehow turned the disaster into laughter. 10 minutes later, the girl was smiling again. Watching that moment affected me more than it should have. Later, Emily found me sitting alone beneath the shade of a large maple tree. "I never expected to see you here," she admitted. "Neither did I." She laughed. "And yet here you are." For a few moments, we watched the neighborhood around us. Children played basketball nearby. Music drifted through the air. The smell of food trucks filled the afternoon breeze. It felt simple, peaceful, real. "You look happier here," I said. Emily glanced across the park. "This place reminds me of what matters." The answer stayed with me. What matters? In my world, people constantly discussed profits, influence, expansion, and strategy. Emily talked about people, families, community, kindness, things that could not be measured on financial reports. As the afternoon ended, an elderly woman approached our bench. She squeezed Emily's hand and thanked her for years of volunteer work. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. The woman walked away before Emily noticed me staring. "What?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "Nothing." But it was not nothing. Because that afternoon, another piece of the wall around my heart quietly disappeared. I had spent years building an empire. Emily Foster spent her time building people up. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer impressed by power. I was impressed by her. The moment you realize you can lose someone is usually the moment you understand how much they matter. Until then, it is easy to pretend. Easy to convince yourself that time is unlimited. Easy to believe tomorrow will always come. For me, that illusion lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days after the community fundraiser, I arrived at another charity event hosted inside an elegant rooftop venue overlooking Midtown Manhattan. The evening sky glowed with shades of gold and deep blue. Guests moved between tables decorated with candles and flowers. Music floated through the warm spring air. Everything seemed normal. Then I saw Emily standing near the bar. She was smiling. Not at me. At another man. I stopped walking. The reaction was immediate and completely irrational. The man looked about my age. Well-dressed. Confident. Friendly. He said something that made Emily laugh. The sound carried across the rooftop and landed directly in my chest. I disliked him instantly, which would have been amusing if it had not been so unsettling. Because I knew absolutely nothing about him. One of my associates appeared beside me. "That is Daniel Harper," he said casually. I had not realized I was staring. "Who?" "Architect. Good reputation. Smart guy." He smiled. "I heard he asked Emily out last week." The words should not have bothered me. Emily was free to spend time with anyone she wanted. We were not together. We had never discussed feelings. We were barely even friends by normal standards. Yet none of those facts improved my mood. Throughout the evening, I found my attention drifting toward them. Daniel seemed kind. Emily seemed comfortable around him. Every observation made me increasingly aware of something I had spent months avoiding. Jealousy. Pure and simple. The realization irritated me. I was not a teenager. I was a grown man who managed complex negotiations worth millions of dollars. Yet one smiling architect had somehow reduced me to watching the room like a fool. Later that evening, Emily found me standing alone near the edge of the rooftop terrace. City lights stretched endlessly beneath us. "You disappeared," she said. I glanced at her. I could say the same thing. She smiled. "Daniel wanted to show me some photos from a project he is working on." I nodded. Calmly. "At least on the outside." "Interesting." Emily studied me for a second. "Are you okay?" Nobody should have been able to read me that easily. Yet somehow she always did. "Of course." She tilted her head slightly. "You sound annoyed." I almost laughed. "I am not annoyed." She crossed her arms. "You definitely sound annoyed." The conversation should have been amusing. Instead, it felt dangerously close to revealing something I was not prepared to admit. Emily eventually returned to the party. I remained on the terrace long after she left. watching the city, thinking. For months I had convinced myself that what I felt was curiosity, then friendship, then admiration. Daniel Harper destroyed that illusion in a single evening. Because the truth was suddenly impossible to ignore. I did not want another man making Emily laugh. I did not want another man becoming important to her. And I certainly did not want another man building a future with her. For the first time since Emily Foster walked into my life, I stopped wondering what she meant to me. I already knew the answer. The real question was whether I had realized it too late. The hardest battles are never fought against other people. They are fought against the truths we spend the longest trying to avoid. 4 days after the rooftop event, I tried convincing myself that nothing had changed. I buried myself in meetings, signed contracts, reviewed reports, flew between cities. Yet no matter how busy I became, the same thought followed me everywhere. Emily. The problem was no longer understanding how I felt. The problem was deciding what to do about it. One Thursday evening, I found myself standing alone inside my office overlooking Manhattan. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The city lights blurred beneath the storm. My desk was covered with documents waiting for approval. I ignored all of them. Instead, I stared at a photograph from a recent charity event. Emily was standing in the background helping volunteers. She did not even know the picture existed. Yet somehow she had become the center of it. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." My longtime advisor stepped inside carrying a folder. He stopped when he noticed the photograph. Then he smiled. "There she is." I looked up. "What are you talking about?" "The woman you have been pretending not to care about for months." Normally, I would have dismissed the comment. This time I remained silent. He sat across from me. "You know, Luca, you are very good at understanding other people." I waited. "You are terrible at understanding yourself." After he left, I spent another hour alone with those words. Terrible at understanding yourself. Maybe he was right. Because the truth seemed obvious now. I admired Emily. I respected her. I trusted her. More importantly, I wanted her happiness. Even if that happiness eventually led her away from me, the realization should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. The next afternoon, I met Emily for coffee at a small cafe near Bryant Park. Nothing unusual about that. We had met several times before. Yet this felt different. The moment she walked through the door, smiling as she spotted me, something settled inside my chest. Not excitement. Not anxiety. Certainty. We spent nearly 2 hours talking. Not about charity events. Not about work. About childhood memories. Family traditions. Dreams. Regrets. The kinds of conversations people only have when they genuinely want to know each other. At one point, Emily laughed and shook her head. "You know something?" "What?" "The first time I met you, I thought you were intimidating." I smiled. "Only the first time?" She laughed again. The sound immediately improved the entire afternoon. Then her expression softened. "You are different than people think." For several seconds, I simply looked at her. She had no idea how much those words meant. Because most people spent their lives reacting to my reputation. Emily always reacted to me. When we finally left the cafe, the sun was beginning to set behind the skyscrapers. We walked together through the park while golden light filtered between the trees. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether I should tell her the truth. I already knew I would. The only question remaining was when. And as Emily smiled beside me while the city glowed around us, I realized something else. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt like a business plan. It felt like a possibility. And every version of that future somehow included her. Sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the smallest moments. Not grand gestures. Not dramatic speeches. Just quiet acts of care that nobody notices until much later. A few days after our walk through Bryant Park, Emily called me unexpectedly. Her voice sounded distracted. "I hope I am not interrupting anything." I smiled despite myself. "You are not." There was a brief pause. "I found something today." Curiosity immediately replaced every other thought. "What did you find?" Another pause. Longer this time. A pattern. Those 2 words stayed with me for the rest of the drive across Manhattan. That evening we met at a small cafe near the river. The moment I arrived, I knew something had changed. Emily was holding a folder. Not a work folder. A personal one. She waited until we were seated before opening it. Inside were photographs, event schedules, donation records, and handwritten notes. I recognized some of them immediately. Others I had forgotten existed. Emily looked at me carefully. "You have been helping people around me for months." I said nothing. She continued, turning pages. A scholarship donation for a student volunteer whose funding had disappeared. Repairs for the recreation center in Brooklyn. Support for a senior assistance program that had nearly closed. Quiet contributions made without publicity, without recognition, without my name attached. Emily looked up. Every time something important to me was struggling, someone stepped in. I remained silent. It was you. The words hung between us. Outside the window, the river reflected the evening lights. Inside the cafe, conversations faded into background noise. There was no point denying it. Yes. Emily stared at me. Not angry, not upset, simply trying to understand. Why did you never tell me? I thought about the answer. Then I laughed softly. Because it was never about me knowing. She blinked. What does that mean? I leaned back in my chair. You help people because it matters to you. I helped because it mattered to you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Emily lowered her eyes toward the folder. When she looked up again, there was emotion in her expression I had never seen before. You really did all of this? I nodded. Most of it. She shook her head slowly. Nobody does that. I smiled. Apparently one person does. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Then her eyes grew suspiciously bright. The sight affected me more than I wanted to admit. We spent hours talking after that. Not about money. Not about influence. About purpose. About family. About the kind of people we wanted to become. When the cafe finally closed, we walked outside together. The night air carried the scent of rain. City lights stretched endlessly across the water. Emily stopped beside the railing overlooking the river. I think I understand something now. I looked at her. What? She smiled softly. The man everyone else talks about is not the man I know. My heart did something unfamiliar. Something dangerous. Because in that moment I realized she had finally seen behind every wall I had spent years building. And standing there beside the water, with the city glowing around us, I knew the next step could no longer be avoided. The truth was no longer hidden. The only thing left was to finally say it. The truth felt different once it was no longer hiding. After our conversation by the river, I spent the next 2 days thinking about everything that had brought us there. The gala, the rooftop, the coffee shop, the countless moments that seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt like pieces of a path leading somewhere inevitable. On Friday evening, I asked Emily to meet me in Central Park. The city was glowing beneath the last light of spring. Trees swayed gently in the breeze. The lake reflected gold and silver across the water. Families were heading home. Couples wandered along the paths. The entire city seemed to slow down for a moment. Emily arrived wearing a simple smile and a light jacket. You sounded serious on the phone, she said. Should I be worried? I laughed softly. No. Then I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who had changed everything without ever trying to. The woman who saw kindness where others saw power. The woman who somehow made me want to become better than I had been yesterday. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I finally said the words that had waited far too long. The night we met, I thought you saved me from an embarrassing headline. Emily smiled. That was the goal. I nodded. I was wrong. Her expression softened. What do you mean? I took a breath. You saved me from something much worse. She waited quietly. You saved me from becoming a man who spent his entire life chasing success and never noticing what actually mattered. Emotion appeared in her eyes. I continued before courage could disappear. Every place feels better when you are there. Every conversation becomes more interesting. Every future I imagine somehow includes you. My voice grew quieter. And I am tired of pretending I do not know why. Emily stared at me. The city seemed to disappear around us. Luca, I shook my head gently. I do not need an answer right away. I just need you to know the truth. I care about you. More than I ever expected. More than I planned. More than I know how to explain. For a moment, she simply looked at me. Then she laughed through tears she was trying unsuccessfully to hide. Do you know how frustrating you are? She asked. I blinked. That seems like a bad sign. She shook her head. I have been waiting months for you to say that. The relief that followed was impossible to describe. We both laughed. The tension disappeared. The distance disappeared. Everything that had remained unsaid finally lost its power. Emily stepped closer. You know what I realized? She asked. What? Her smile was brighter than the city lights behind her. The best thing that ever happened to me started with one very reckless decision. I smiled. I was thinking the same thing. We began walking along the lake as evening settled across Manhattan. No cameras, no headlines, no expectations, just two people moving forward together. And as I looked at the woman beside me, I understood something I would never forget. Power can open doors. Success can build a life. But love is what finally makes that life worth living. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt exactly where it belonged.